On this episode of the Layover Live, Ben Holman stops by to talk paid media and the road ahead. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 150 of the Layover Live, where we bring you the top article from the Layover each week. I'm Jason Swick, VP of Strategy and Insights at SimpleView, and welcome to the show. Now, it's been a pretty amazing week. You know, we saw some decreases with COVID cases kind of starting to trend down, which was good to see. We have the Bucks and the Chiefs headed to the Super Bowl. And if you're a UFC fan this weekend, probably not so good if you're a Conor McGregor fan, but as things didn't pose too well for him in his fight. But there is another fight that has been happening as of late, and that is the fight between Apple and Facebook. It's been, really a busy year for Facebook, with the election, the data privacy. Senate's been talking to them more than normal, and a slew of other things. And one thing that has the potential, though, for causing some trouble for media buyers out there is the new Apple iOS update, which is what Facebook is a little upset about. So now, this update was originally intended, I think, to be rolled out in September, but it looks like it's going to be happening then over the next coming weeks. Now, the rollout includes some tracking prompts that set to really disrupt Facebook ads targeting, which is an audience of more than 2 billion people, which is crazy. And so I wanted to bring in Ben Holman, who is the lead digital media analyst, to discuss this today. So Ben, welcome to the show.
Yeah, happy to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah, happy to have you here as well. I know we're getting some weather down here in Arizona. Ben, how are things up at your way in Seattle?
It's cloudy and gray, pretty much same old up here.
Okay, yeah, so normal for you, but like weather for us, which is pretty funny. So that's hilarious. But, as we're joking around about the weather and what's happening in the space, this entire month we've been focusing our shows around looking and preparing for the road ahead. And today we're going to focus on paid media and the new updates, as I mentioned, coming to iOS 14 and all that brings, and tying them all together as our article of the week this week, which comes from Search Engine Land, and it addresses many of the things that we're going to talk about today on the show. It's a great article. Check it out. Now, as Facebook advertisers, we are bracing for the impact that this may bring, but I wanted to be sure that this was on everyone's radar. So, Ben, I just want to jump right into it with my first question for you then. Look, one of the trends that we've spoken about lately is that of privacy, right? We had Eric Rankin talking about privacy on the show, and I want to talk about it as it relates a little bit more to paid media, as it's no different. Now we have the IDFA and the AAID are just some of the new terms that we've seen pop up as of late, especially around iOS 14, which is an update that's coming from Apple, which has caused some contention, as we mentioned, between Apple and Facebook. So let's just maybe start there. Tell us a little bit more about, this Apple privacy update and how it's going to affect Facebook advertising, because a lot of DMOs out there use Facebook for targeting. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Definitely. Yeah, and as you mentioned, with some context here, this was announced last year, and there was a decent amount of pushback with the pandemic kind of being in full swing, and also not being much time for app developers to kind of react to this. So it was delayed. We're starting to see some updates roll out in Facebook last week, and the iOS privacy update should be coming soon. So what it revolves around is the IDFA, as you mentioned, which is identifier for advertisers. And it's a unique string of numbers that Facebook uses to identify each unique mobile device. And of course, so that's really important in all sorts of targeting on Facebook and reporting for conversions. So what this update will do is each time a user opens an app for the first time, they'll be prompted, and the prompt will basically ask them if they consent to being tracked as they use the app, and any tracking around the web from like the Facebook pixel, for example. And the linchpin here is users have the opportunity to opt out and not be tracked. And so this kind of goes along with a lot of the line that Apple has been taking, where they've said things like privacy is a human right, and they basically want to give that control back to users for what corporations are doing with their data and give them more control over their privacy. As you'd imagine, Facebook, on the other hand, not very happy about this. They've said, among other statements, that this will disproportionately harm small businesses, since they rely on Facebook to do a lot of personalized advertising, either through remarketing or prospecting. And it will even play out eventually with Google, and not too different from even Google's move to be eventually removing third-party cookies in Chrome at some point next year. So kind of following that general trend of more control for users on what happens with their data, but of course, it will definitely mean some changes. So going into the actual impact, now that we have some of the context out of the way, there's
Mm-hmm.
three main ones. That'll be obviously an impact on conversions, the volume of conversions and reporting there, the attribution related to those conversions when you're looking within Facebook. And then probably the biggest one for a lot of our clients is the impact on Facebook audiences and the quality and size of those audiences. So to unpack each of those, the main impact probably will be that conversions, if you're looking within Facebook, will most likely decrease. Basically, if a user opts out of that tracking, then Facebook won't be able to identify that unique user and see if they converted on your website after they came in from an ad, or to remarket specifically to them. So you'll want to keep an eye on those conversions to see if they start to decline. It is important to note that for clients that are using Facebook more for kind of awareness and upper funnel, the conversions aren't as important for these campaigns. If you have like conversion focused campaigns on Facebook, Facebook's using that conversion data to continuously optimize those campaigns, kind of like Google Smart Bidding, if you're familiar with that. So that's one important thing to keep in mind with the decline in conversions. For the attribution window, this kind of goes hand in hand with the decline in conversions. They're decreasing the available windows that you can choose from 28 days to either 7 days or 1 days. And again, with a lot of our clients, if we are doing conversion campaigns on Facebook, something for like a visitor guide request, an e-newsletter sign up, or even a partner referral, those will often occur either the same day the user clicked on the ad or within those 7 days. So that won't have as large of an impact. You know, for a lot of clients that might be selling an actual product or B2B, where the sales time is longer, they need that kind of longer window that they'll be losing with this update. And the final one, the audience. Obviously, if people opt out of tracking, then we won't be able to have detailed remarketing audiences. Lookalike audiences won't be as accurate, and even app activity. So if you're targeting people who like previously liked your page or interacted with any of posts on your Facebook page. So this could have kind of a trickle down effect on general campaign performance, things like click-through rate, even conversion rate and cost per lead. So that's the one where we'll want to keep a close eye on things to see if people opt out, how much will that impact the campaign performance?
Yeah, all good stuff there, Ben. That's a good background on exactly what's going to happen and the impact that it's going to make. You mentioned what Facebook's really upset about is the fact that this is going to be blatantly popping up and asking people for, permission to do those things, which they kind of before, listen, they asked for people's permission, but it was really buried and it was like not front and facing. So imagine some people, many folks are going to probably opt out, I'd imagine, for targeting, but we'll have to just wait and see. Like we just don't know, right? But we can expect some of those things. And you touched on some of the impact that's going to have. So, and that impact it's going to have is going to affect DMOs and how they're going to be ready for this. So maybe talk now about maybe, ways that DMOs can kind of prepare and be ready for this change that's coming.
Yeah, of course. As I mentioned earlier, there are kind of two camps for looking at this update and what sort of action items you should take. For all of those clients that are using Facebook more for just awareness, kind of that brand awareness, reach, focusing on campaign objectives like impressions or link clicks, they'll be less impacted by the decline in conversions because those campaigns aren't using those conversions to optimize. But for clients who are using Facebook to get leads or have valuable actions taken on their website, you'll want to keep a close eye on that conversion volume within Facebook ads to see what it looks like, if that then impacts your click-through rate and cost per click, conversion rate for those campaigns as well. One thing to keep in mind as well, if you're tracking a lot of conversions using Facebook's Pixel, is they have a new maximum number of events of 8. So for most of our clients, again, they might just be having event conversions for visitor guide requests, e-newsletter signups, and partner referrals. So that's well below the maximum. But if you do have a lot of events that are being tracked, you want to organize those. You can verify your domain with Facebook, and then you can prioritize which events you want Facebook to be using with this update. A big action item that we definitely recommend as well, one that is kind of a best practice in general, but takes on more importance now, is using UTM parameters with all of your Facebook ads. So this will identify in Google Analytics, for example, what traffic is coming from which campaign, ad set, and ad, and then if people converted. So it's important to note that this update is going to be impacting Facebook's reporting on conversions, but in other sources like Google Analytics, you'll still see who is converting there. You can kind of have that larger picture of the other channels you're using in addition to Facebook. So you can use that data in analytics to build detailed remarketing audiences that will still be pretty high quality, unlike potentially Facebook, where they're going to get less accurate. And then you can use those audiences to remarket on search campaign, display, or video, and even see, if Facebook starts to decline, you can see conversion rates dropping some in analytics. You could then shift budgets between channels based on what you see in Google Analytics. And as we've said before, you never want to put all your eggs in one basket anyways. So this is just an opportunity to take a step back, look at your larger media mix. And if Facebook does start to perform a little bit worse, then you can shift your budget to Google or other channels. I do want to provide at least like 1 or 2 specific workarounds if you really rely on Facebook conversion campaigns.
Sure.
You are able to target by operating system in Facebook ads. So you have the option to only target Android devices with a campaign or only iOS. So if you do start to see a decline in performance, you could break those out by operating system, shift budget probably to Android if it does end up performing better, and then kind of go from there depending on how things shake out. Another kind of workaround is using lead gen forms, which is a type of ad in Facebook where the information is collected from the user directly within the Facebook app. You're then able to download those leads for like an e-newsletter and upload them into your CRM. And since that's not using the Facebook pixel to optimize, since the conversion is within the Facebook app itself, those should be less impacted, and you should still be able to get pretty valuable conversion rates for something like an e-newsletter.
Yeah, Ben, like really good insights and information, not only for what DMOs can do to prepare, but I love that you gave some workarounds and some things to really help, hedge this as best we can. Listen, this isn't a sky is falling type of update that's happening. It's just something to be aware of, and it's going to affect different DMOs in different ways. I think, in the article it mentioned that they were talking to some other agencies out there getting advice, and they felt like this is like if we're talking about the impact scale, right? It was like it was right in the middle of impact, right? Something to be mindful of though, because data privacy is playing a bigger part. We've talked about, the stuff already with Google and that what's planned for 2022 with third-party cookies. And this is just a step in that direction of giving the end user more control about how their data is used and utilized. And you're going to see more of this and more of this play out. Now, the impact of that also, we're not going to know about until after this starts to play out and we start to measure and see data that we can then formulate our hypotheses on and then be able to test those out. I like your idea of being able to break things out by mobile device. If you start to see big declines in your performance, break those things out so that you can separate and segment. That segmentation often provides a lot more detail for us as we're going through and analyzing our accounts. So I think that's really, really, really good advice and spot on. So, okay, that's great updates. I think there, Ben, as it relates to like the iOS update that's coming out and some of the news that we've heard recently with the battles between Facebook and Apple. But I want to ask you about other paid media trends that are out there as well, because those aren't the only places that people are spending money. And as we're moving towards a new era of marketing and having to, really tighten up and do more with less, what are some of the other paid media trends that maybe you're seeing out there that DMOs should be aware of outside of what you've already shared that you'd be willing to provide here?
So one thing, if we pivot to like the search side of things, since we do a lot there as well, as you'd expect with the slower start to Q1, we've seen a lot of search demand decline for travel related terms for destinations across the country, kind of similar to the early phases of the pandemic when we had to shift more local for the local audience.
Right.
Again, just seeing that compared to like the summer, for example, when there were some resurgences in travel demand in parts of the country, search demand is starting to come down a little bit. Budgets are not being spent as easily on search campaigns. That kind of ties into what you can do with budgets, saving them for later in the year, for example. But that's one thing to keep in mind as we look at January and probably February performance as well. In terms of what content is still doing really well, as a lot of our clients have been hearing, users are still looking for anything related to outdoor recreation in their destination if the weather permits, along with something that was popular leading up to the holidays and has continued to be so far into January is an emphasis on kind of supporting local, shopping local. Consumers realize that a lot of the businesses they used to frequent regularly and that they know well, they need them now more than ever to kind of stick around once things start to open up again. So if you have any content that deals with outdoor recreation, local shopping, ways you can shop online for independent businesses, that's content that consumers are definitely still searching for as they kind of, in some parts of the country, have to stay home more.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with the outdoor recreation. I think we're seeing data everywhere that's really speaking to that. It's a good focus, right? If we're looking for the immediate future, it's still a focus on local markets. It's still a focus on these outdoor type activities. Just because we're kind of in these uncertain times, and then as we've already mentioned, this tale of two halves this year, is something that we have to think about, right? But if you're looking for that immediate future and those trends, it's definitely towards those outdoor activities and some of that local market traffic, which has been said many, many different ways in many, many different places. But it brings up my last point, which I want to ask you is, as we're talking about these two halves, maybe any advice you'd like to share with destination marketers out there. I know we've liked to ask this question almost of every single one of our guests that comes on the show, because I think getting those multiple viewpoints is really, really important. So maybe any other advice, whether it's related to these iOS updates, Ben, or if it's related to other paid media trends, what other advice do you have that you'd like to share with destination marketers before we go?
Yeah, as I mentioned with the kind of search demand, of course, you can be saving budget for later in the year, as we've mentioned in a lot of content. Once the drive market starts to come back, it'll be a good time to really expand your efforts. In terms of what's currently running, we do recommend if you have Facebook ads or even search ads, just do a quick check of your copy again. You can kind of shift more of that aspirational future planning and dreaming stage at this point, rather than encouraging like an immediate, road trip with where cases are at in a lot of the country. Another important point that people can start planning for is thinking of all the ways you can remarket to people who have engaged with you over the past 9 months or so. So you can get really detailed with remarketing with something like display, based on what parts of the website people visited, whether that was outdoors content or hotel deals, or even the people who, for instance, would have requested a visitor guide over the last 9 months, but then maybe didn't make that trip. So reaching out to them again, those people who are already familiar with your destination are definitely a valuable audience that you can hone in on as people start to travel more in Q2 and Q3. And then I think a final point that I've seen mentioned a couple times related to, as you expand to the drive market more, I think a lot of people's first trip will probably be visiting friends and relatives who they haven't seen in some cases 9 or 10 months. So any content or campaign that you could create that would speak to kind of things to do with a family, different age groups, what would appeal to kind of families and friends who want to do some sort of small trip together and are looking to reconnect after time apart.
Yeah, good, all good stuff there, Ben. I think, one thing that kind of sparked my curiosity there with your recommendations was thinking about remarketing, right? We all know we do it. It's something that's important as we nurture a relationship and try to move somebody from one stage of the buyer's journey to another. But it is something to think about, right? Behaviors have changed. Targeting has changed. Budgets have changed, as we already mentioned. But remarketing, I think, is something that's really important because those people have already engaged with your brand. So take some of the learnings that you've had from past visitors and incorporate those into new insights to try to nurture that relationship, I think is really, really important. So that's all really, really good advice. And I appreciate you coming on today and sharing that with everyone.
Yeah, of course. It was nice to be back. It had been a while, so I'm happy to have another episode under my belt.
Yeah, it was nice to see you as well. And we were happy to have you here. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights. And for those out there, if you're not subscribed, please do so now. We're also available on Spotify and iTunes if you want to absorb us through audio podcast as well. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time, everyone. Have a great day.